As a kid, my family would pick raspberries by the state prison. We'd drive out along Route 2, past the fields where we played soccer, and the signs for Walden Pond and the Italian restaurant on the right, before the highway turned into a rotary, and on either side of us stood barbed wire fences and a watchtower and a sign for the Massachusetts Correctional Institution. We'd take the exit for the farm and spend hours filling our buckets with berries and eating ourselves sick, and my hands and lips would always be left with deep crimson stains. Afterwards, we'd drive back home to our house on a dead-end street tucked into one of the many suburbs of Boston. My town was only 4 miles wide, but as a kid, my parents taught me a song in case I got lost. It was a little jingle that went like this. My name is Maggie O'Brien, and this is my address. 42 Hillside Terrace, Belmont, Massachusetts. The name I have in that song is Maggie, but my real name is Margaret, and I went by a lot of nicknames as a kid. My teammates call me Wheels, my parents call me Margaretta, and my sisters call me Boo, and everyone called me Mags or MOB, but the most endearing was always Magpie. It's a name I spent this past year thinking a lot about because I met a real magpie for the first time, and I started wondering, what is a name of endearment when it's also a bird? I live in another part of the country now. I'm a white queer kid who clings on to the kind of identity liberation I found at my liberal arts school. In reality, I moved from one wealthy suburb to another. My new home sits at the foothills of the Continental Divide. There's a valley I run down almost every day, filled with tall grasses and limber pine trees and a blue sky marked by telephone wires. Whenever I run here, I see magpies scattered across the landscape. They're big birds, as big as crows, with black and white feathers that furl out like a checkerboard. Every magpie has a streak of blue that shines iridescent in the sun. The Western mythology of magpies is of meanness. In stories, they appear as witches, birds of the underworld with drops of the devil's blood on their tongue. A group of them is called a parliament, like the British government. They're stately but mischievous. Magpies are kind of full of themselves. They're fascinated by shiny objects and are one of the few species who can recognize their own image in mirrors. Whenever I look at a magpie, it's the particular black, white, and blue of their feathers that remind me of police officers. A few weeks ago, I had plans to spend the weekend in Rocky Mountain National Park, about an hour from my home. I needed to get there early to pick up a permit, so I left as the sun was just rising and painting the plains golden. I drove through a town with old Western inns and a gas station with fluorescent signs for diesel, before weaving my way up to a canyon with white-toothed mountains in the distance. I was probably going about 60 miles an hour, coffee in one hand, my hand in the other wheel, when a bird flew across the road about 300 feet ahead of me. I saw another teeter across the pavement behind it, and at this point, I was close enough to recognize the bird. It was a magpie. By then I had reached the spot where they had crossed the road, and suddenly a third came swooping in from the right. And for a moment I saw it paused in flight right there in front of me through the windshield before it hit the front bumper of my car with a thud. I quickly looked in the rearview mirror and saw it was twitching, limping with loose feathers in the middle of the road. I didn't stop because I had somewhere to be. I've grown up as a magpie, which is to say, I grew up white and wearing the colors of a police state. I grew up self-obsessed, like a modern Narcissus. The world of my suburbia was a mirror. I looked out at it and saw my own whiteness reflected back at me. My town was marked by the absence of police, but I was still raised to act like a more vicious, invisible militia. We learned to keep the cafeteria tables separate and never equal. We belonged to tennis clubs with black staff waiting on us at minimum wage. We sip white wine and eat PB&Js on white bread. We have our streets cleaned and our lawns groomed. And in the buses, bring the Black kids there in the morning and away in the afternoon. I was so used to my own whiteness that I never even learned to call it by its real name. I learned how to sing songs to cops in case I got lost. A Black trans artist named Tourmaline, who I follow on Instagram, recently wrote, "When we say abolish the police, we also mean the cop in your head and in your heart." Was the magpie I killed the cop in my head or in my heart? What does it mean to dissect the parts of yourself so stained with systems of power and policing? Who did I leave by the yellow line on the road to be run over by the next car and the next and the next?